Hi, I'm Gary Kim, the editor of Carrier Evolution, and I'm here today with Bill Barney, the CEO of Pacnet, a PTC veteran and a guy who's very knowledgeable about the state of submarine markets, especially in Asia. And Bill, thanks for joining us today.
It's good to be here, Gary.
Of the things that you've got on your agenda for 2011, what would be the one thing that in your mind really stands out as what you've got to get done?
Well, I think what we're seeing right now is you're actually seeing convergence in a different way. We're starting to see the data center market coming together with the telecom market. I think one of the things that we're very, very active in right now is the as content becomes bigger and chunkier around the region, we're actually having to build infrastructure around that. So for the first time in probably 5 or 6 years, we're investing very, very heavily into infrastructure. We launched 3 data centers in the last 3.5 months, and we'll launch another 6 over the next 9 months. And we're also building cables, so it's actually it's an interesting time. It's there is a huge opportunity to put infrastructure to work right now in Asia.
Right. And when you talk about data centers, is the model that you want content providers to physically co-locate in your centers?
Yeah, we call them data landing stations. We're actually converting, in some places, our landing stations into data centers, and then in some cases we're actually building greenfield. So, for example, we have a greenfield opportunity in Australia that we're building out, and then we're essentially building these large content-driving, high-powered data landing stations. First one was in Hong Kong. We're building a second. We built a second one in Singapore.
I would assume also that if you've got a facility that can handle hosted applications, then there are all sorts of other things that potentially could be done in those centers by application providers.
Exactly. And I think, the world is interesting. I mean, if you think about content delivery, I think that's where you're going to see the most change in the next 24 to 36 months. I think one of the reasons why you're seeing a lot of consolidation around the CDN market right now is because pipes are getting bigger, and the airports that actually house these big files are actually getting bigger. And I think that's going to be a very, very big change as we start to see video become very, very important. And it's interesting, I think if you think about all of us veterans that are in the industry, we remembered when the internet came on and essentially 90% of our networks were largely for voice. If you think about the mid-90s, early 90s, that went to 90% internet traffic. If you look at 2015, we're going to be doing 90% of our traffic is going to be handling video, okay? Yeah. And if you look at our networks, and I think that's the real change that we've got to get ready for, and it's going to be very, very interesting because I think you have to do things a lot differently to deal with video. It's a very different application.
What are some of the things that you found your staff has got to do to handle video like it used to handle voice?
Well, you think about it, video has got a quality of service with it. The internet really didn't have a quality of service element to it. It was a best effort. Essentially, you move stuff around, but video, people don't want to see clipping. Same as when they're talking to someone on the phone, they don't necessarily want to hear the voice breaking up all the time. And I think it causes the importance of having networks end-to-end that are actually operational all the way through. And I think that's going to be the challenge with video as it becomes more and more important in everyone's daily lives. And I think we're going to see this rapidly in Asia, in the next, I would say, probably 24 months. It's going to be an explosion that we're going to see there. I think we've just started to see a little bit of it.
In terms of the image quality issues that you're mentioning, the technical guys always use the term jitter and latency, right? Latency being the delay in the arrival of the packet, the jitter being the packets get out of order. Of those two, is it really the jitter that's the bugaboo for video, or is it equal parts latency?
I think it's equal parts, and I think the thing that we struggle with is, what you have in Asia is you've got long distances as well, right? So you're not talking, if you think about the average distance between two countries in Asia is the difference from the east coast of the United States to the west coast, at least, if not further. Okay, if you think about Europe, you're crossing the borders and it's a couple miles, right? So there are massive also, as you think about attenuation over long distances with video, there are those things come into it, which causes many problems on the networks. The other problem is that the local infrastructure. So you actually, if you think about your last mile coverage in most places, in some cases it's still aerial in about 60% of Asia, right? Which has, these all cause jitter problems. These all cause, back to your original question, they cause, serious problems on the network in terms of quality of service. And I think that's going to be, we're going to continue to work on trying to fix those things, but those will be challenges that will affect the video going forward.
Now, in terms of the enterprise customers that you deal with, and video or any other new hosted applications, are you seeing changes in your potential revenue model from serving those kinds of applications?
Well, I think if you look at it, I'm not seeing everyone's talking about cloud computing. I would say cloud computing is not quite there yet.
Well, it's a good idea.
Yeah, anyway. It's a great idea. It's a great idea, and it's a great way to sell kit. But at the end of the day, it's in Asia. I don't think that's where things are happening. But what I think you do see is that you do have our business customers are definitely looking at new ways to engage. If you think about land-based applications, Ethernet, you do see a massive expansion that's happening in certain areas, but you're not quite at the, I would say what you're seeing in the US is not necessarily what's happening in Asia today.
I'm not sure that a whole lot of it's happening in the US yet either, not in terms of volume.
Yeah, no, I'd say, but it's a great, it's interesting. Investors love, you want to talk about something interesting, you talk about cloud computing. But if you're talking to a CIO of a major corporation, that's not what they're interested in. They're looking at high-speed Ethernet, they're looking at ways to get point-to-point circuits in place, and many of them are still, I would say, probably one evolution behind where I think everyone thinks they are today. It's very interesting.
It would seem, though, that as mission-critical apps go into the cloud, it reinserts the role of the carrier into the value chain in a way that actually is much more solid than has been the case in the past couple of years.
It depends on who bills for it, right? I think it's interesting. I had an interesting discussion with a mobile operator last week. If you are actually billing for the applications in the cloud, it's okay. But if you think about like the iPhone's model, okay, essentially the application is being billed directly to the end user, and the carrier doesn't really get anything, and they actually have to cover the cost of the transport. So if carriers can actually put themselves into the financial equation, yes, it will be a very good opportunity. But there's a very good chance that they may not be able to, depending on. And I think it's developed markets versus developing markets are going to be very different. I think developing markets where everyone's on a prepaid mobile platform or their prepaid broadband platform, yes, the carrier will benefit, okay? But I think in a place where there are multiple payment models, they may not. And that's going to be the challenge, I think, for the carriers to make sure that they're inserted into that.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that at some point the regulators may get involved again in a way that you can't build this way and you can't package that way.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be an interesting dynamic how it all plays out. And the interesting thing is, the cloud, I think, is a consumer app right now, right? You think about it, who's using the cloud? The consumer's using the cloud. It's not the business customer today. They will be. I think it's actually going to go consumers in the cloud, SMEs in the cloud, and then your large corporates will actually get there. But it's going to be sort of the opposite, I think, of where everyone's thinking it's coming from. I think it's going to go in the opposite direction. And I think, if you look at it, you and I today, how much of the stuff do you actually use in the cloud? I'm actually a big cloud user myself.
I live on the cloud.
Yeah, we're in the clouds, but as consumers, right? It's amazing. So,
great. Well, Bill, thanks very much for joining us today.
Good to see you.
And thanks for watching.